Welcome back to 504 Road Trips. Today we are going to change the motor oil in the 504 Road Trip Civic. And I know this is a relatively simple maintenance task, but a lot of people have no idea how to do it. And this is actually my first time changing the oil in this car. We had complimentary oil changes from the dealer, and so I let them do it, and that's expired, so this is my first time doing it. So I'm going to go step by step how to do it. So to get this shield off, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, and this takes a number 3 Phillips bit, which is the big one that you don't see used too often. And unscrew it. And all this is just shielding under the motor. I guess it keeps water and mud from getting up in there, and just makes it difficult to access everything. Alright, and then this thing should just slide back. Yep. That's it. Now we got access to the oil filter and the drain plug right there. So this drain plug comes off with a 17mm socket, and as far as I can see at this point, the only tools that you need to do an oil change in this car is the number 3 Phillips to get the shield off and the 17mm socket, assuming we can get the oil filter off by hand. And we'll get to that a little bit later. Let me see if I can break this thing loose. I don't know whether it broke loose or whether it came off. Nope, it's loose. Alright. So we get the oil pan underneath the drain and prepare for a mess. Hopefully I'll be able to get this out without getting oil all over me. If you kind of push in on the plug while you unscrew it until the last thread releases, it'll hold the oil, and sometimes you can get your hand out of the way before the oil gets all over you. Like, well, okay, it's draining, so got that accomplished. Okay, so the oil's been draining for about 15 minutes now, and it's continuing to trickle out just a little bit, and that's just oil running off the internal parts of the engine. At this point, I'm going to put the oil plug back in because it's going to take forever for it all to come out, and for the most part, you're talking about 1/100% of the oil that's in there. So I'm going to get this plug threaded in, and I'm going to wipe it down again. I cleaned the plug real good, wipe down the surface where the plug makes contact with the oil pan. Can't see what I'm doing here. And get that pan tight, and then I'm going to tighten it up with the wrench. And that's about it. Now the next thing is the oil filter. And in all the cars that I've owned, and we're talking more than 20, I've always been able to get these filters off by hand. And I got big hands, so I can usually wrap my hand most of the way around the filter. This one, however, there's no way to get your hand around it, so I used this thing right here while the oil was draining. This goes onto the filter. You put a ratchet on there and you just give it a twist and it breaks it loose, and then from then you can, well, you should be able to undo it by hand. There we go. These don't go on that tight because you'll crush the gasket. So now in this case, oil's probably going to go all over the place, so you got to have the pan. Yep, there it goes. You got to have the pan directly under the filter to catch the oil. And then the filter gets really slick because it's covered with oil, and you do not want to drop the filter into the drain pan because it's going to make a splash. Oil's going to go everywhere, and that's just a mess that we don't want. And this thing must have 50 threads. Oh, there we go. And the filter's full of... Well, that's what I didn't want to do, but anyway. So that's going to drip for a little while up there. So we're just going to let that run out, and then we'll put the new filter on. So the next thing we're going to do while we're waiting for that to drain is we're going to prepare the new oil filter for installation. And this is a K&N filter, and it's got a plastic protective wrap around the gasket, and this rubber gasket here actually feels like it's already got some kind of silicone or something on it, but you don't want to install it dry. So if you dip your finger in the new oil and just rub it around the whole gasket, it'll help it to seal. Another thing you have to be very careful with, and I've had this happen one time before, is that the old filter still has its gasket on it, which it does. If the old gasket sticks to the engine block and stays on there, it may not be obvious depending on how well you can see it when you go to install a new filter. And if you install an oil filter with the old filter still on there, it doesn't form a good seal, and the oil can all blow out between the two seals. So that's something you got to be very careful with. I thought I'd ruin the engine on a 66 Mustang when it decided to blow all of its oil out on an interstate miles from the nearest exit. So this is done draining here, and I'm going to make sure that this surface here where the gasket meets the engine block is clean, and clean off the threads that it screws into. And then all you got to do is screw the new filter right onto it. So you screw that filter on until the gasket touches, and then turn it another quarter turn, and that's as tight as it needs to be. That keeps the gasket from getting crushed. It makes a good seal, and that's it. We're done. We've got the oil plug back in, and we got the filter installed. So now we can get out from under the car and move on to the refill process. Now, one thing we need to check is to see how much oil this car actually takes. Because it's a small engine, it may not take the full 5 quarts that comes in the bottle. Now, in the old cars, there was always an entry in the index that said capacities, and it gave all the fluid capacities, but this one doesn't have that. So we're going to look here at engine oil on page 121. And that page tells us absolutely nothing about how much oil the engine takes. So after doing some searching, I found this section here called fluids, and for engine oil, it lists 4.4 quarts including filter. They list it with and without the filter. You should never change your oil without changing the filter. That's like taking a shower and putting on the same underwear. So we're not going to quite put the whole bottle of oil in, so we'll just put most of it in, and then we'll check the dipstick and see how close it is to full. So back under the hood we have a funnel in place, and we're going to pour in most of this oil. And I'm going to guess that's right around 4.4 quarts. So I'm going to pull the dipstick and see what it reads. Pull it out, wipe it off, get all the old oil off, and it reads, actually it's looking like it's above full, but the car's leaning back, and you're best to check it while it's on level ground. So I'm not going to put any more oil in, and then we're going to go back under the car and see if anything's leaking. So what we're looking at here is the drain plug, and there's no oil coming out there, and there's no sign of any oil running down the filter, so everything should be pretty good and sealed there. So now we got to put this shield back on here, which I'm going to do off camera because it's pretty simple, and you saw how it took it off. You just reverse the procedure to put it back on. So one more thing we're going to do here is change the air filter, and that's going to be right up in here. And this just unclips, lifts up, and it should just pull right out like that. And that's pretty dirty. That's one of the reasons why I dislike having anybody do anything to my car, especially the dealer, is you don't know what they've ever actually done to it. They can put it on the invoice that they changed the air filter, but unless you check it yourself, you never do. But I made the mistake of just letting the dealership do their thing. Another thing that I did was this car has a computer that tells you when you should change the oil, and that comes up every 12 to 13,000 miles, and it's supposed to do it based on the way that you drive. And we do a lot of highway driving, so I figured that's okay, and we're putting full synthetic in it. But maybe I should not have gone that long between oil changes, even with the synthetic. And I think for the future, I'm just going to change it every 5,000. In the past, when I used regular oil, I changed it every 3,000 miles, no matter what. So now we got new oil, we got a new filter, we got a new air filter, and I'm going to start the car up and back it down off the ramps and check the oil one more time, make sure we got enough in there, and that's it, we're done. Check the oil one more time. And it's at full, so just gonna leave that right where it is. Put the oil cap back on. And there's one more thing we gotta do. So we have one more thing to do, and that is to clear the service due now message on the little screen here. And to do that, we're going to press the menu button. Now we have to clear the message and that, and then we press the menu button and go up to vehicle information. I hope y'all can see this. Maintenance info. Oops. And then we're going to select, I can't see it at the same time as the camera, engine oil. Yes. And now we got oil life at 100%. So, and that's all done by using this little D-pad type thing here. So then we hit info. Now we hit menu to exit, and then that's it, we're done. The message is gone and the oil's been changed. Got to make sure and log that, so next time I'll know exactly when it was done. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Hopefully somebody who didn't know how to change their oil knows how to change their oil now. And this doesn't all necessarily apply to the Honda Civic. Other cars are going to have different types of things covering up the bottom of the engine, and a lot of cars will have nothing covering up the bottom of the engine, and that'll make things even simpler. So thanks for watching. Be sure to join us for our next 504 road trip.